Harvard suing the Trump administration following the White House freezing billions of dollars in grants earmarked for the school. The lawsuit accuses the administration of flouting the First Amendment, and it asks a federal judge to declare President Trump's freeze order unconstitutional. Joining us right now is Education Secretary Linda McMahon. Secretary, we appreciate you joining us. I want to just understand from your perspective how much you think the decision around Harvard is directly around anti-Semitism versus what the president has said on Truth Social, which is about his concerns around ideology as it relates to politics.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me this morning. And certainly, the president made it incredibly clear when he was campaigning that he was not going to stand by and watch the attacks of anti-Semitism that were going on in some of the elite colleges around the country, especially Columbia and Harvard and others. And so when the Department of Education started looking into this and talked to presidents, I talked to the president of Columbia. I've also talked to the president of Harvard and to how we could make sure that the universities were abiding by the law. And I made it very clear. I said, these are not First Amendment infractions. This is civil rights. This is making sure that students on all campuses can come and learn and be safe. And that is exactly what the president's direction to me is. And that is why we have had these funds either withheld or frozen during a period of time of negotiation. And we remain very open to continue talking to Harvard. But they have answered by filing a lawsuit on First Amendment rights. So I want to make it very clear, this is not a First Amendment lawsuit. This is about civil rights.
Ms. Secretary, let me read a portion of the letter written by the government to Harvard, because this portion, I think, has a lot more to do with free speech than civil rights. It says, every department or field found to lack viewpoint diversity, which, by the way, an audit is required that the government would have access to, must be reformed by hiring a critical mass of new faculty within that department or field who will provide viewpoint diversity. Every teaching unit found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by admitting a critical mass of students who provide viewpoint diversity. If the review finds that the existing faculty in the relevant department or field is not capable of hiring for viewpoint diversity, or that relevant teaching unit is not capable of admitting a critical mass of students without viewpoint diversity, hiring or admissions within that field shall be transferred to the closest department, field, or teaching that is. There is an audit that would be performed. This would be required to the government. In addition to that, these numbers and statistics would be made public. I ask about this not because it's not a good goal. And by the way, it would be great if Harvard and every private university in the country had viewpoint diversity. The question is whether viewpoint diversity is really about free speech.
Well, let me just say that when we began our negotiations with Harvard, and this letter that was sent to Harvard was a point of negotiation. We were talking about several different points with them. Harvard released this letter to the media. This was a negotiation letter. It was really not a final offer of anything. We had hoped Harvard would come back to the table to discuss these. We would like to have viewpoint diversity. We would like to have all of the things that students that are going to universities have a right to expect. So this is a negotiation tool. We hope Harvard will come back to the table. We'd like to be able to move forward with them and with other universities.
By the way, this letter, as I'm reading it, says this document will constitute an agreement in principle which the parties will work in good faith to translate into a more thorough, binding settlement agreement.
Exactly.
You will see this letter incorporates and supersedes the terms of the federal government's prior letter of April 3rd, 2025, which suggests that this is the deal that the government is trying to put on the table.
Well, that is not the case. It was a letter that was intended to have both parties sit down again and continue their negotiations. That's what I sincerely hope will happen. But Harvard has now filed a lawsuit. The government will counter. I think we're on very solid grounds that the negotiations that we are having with Harvard and the reason that these funds have been frozen is because of a civil rights issue and not a freedom of speech issue. So I feel very confident and solid in that approach by the government.
How concerned are you about the benefits that I imagine you must think, or maybe you don't, think that Harvard provides as it relates to the grants that have been given to the different scientific and medical units at Harvard to do the research that I like to think has benefited all Americans and taxpayers.
I think that the research that is done by many universities around the country has been incredibly beneficial, and most of the money that has been withheld actually has come from HHS, a lot of the scientific research. However, one of the things that the government is saying is that this is a very small part of the research funding if you consider the amount of money that these universities have in their endowments, and maybe we should look to those. But the government is just simply saying, we want to hold you accountable for the money that taxpayers are donating to universities and to make sure that civil rights of the students who are on campuses are protected.
How do you feel about removing their tax-exempt status and whether that should be done to Harvard specifically in a targeted fashion, the way at least some of the discussion that President Trump has had, versus doing that in the context of all private universities?
Well, I think the president has raised it relative to Harvard. And I think we have to look at each situation, one-on-one.
Don't you think that would be discriminatory?
I think we have to investigate and then come to the right conclusions. But let's do the investigation. I think we're putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit here.
What would be the a settlement that you would be happy with? Are you happy with the settlement with Columbia?
Well, we're not quite finalized with Columbia. We are still in negotiation, but they have certainly showed a willingness to be at the table. I'm very pleased with where we are with Columbia, and I think even over the weekend, when we saw that there were some protests on campus, that Columbia did do exactly what they said they were going to do. The police were called in. They made arrests. They shut down this protest when encampments were threatened to be restarted, and that's exactly what we had hoped that they would be doing. So they've showed they're putting teeth behind making sure that students' rights are protected on campus, and I was very pleased to see that over the weekend.